Okay, thank you, everyone. My name is Bill. I'm the chair of the Economic Development and Employment Committee. This meeting of the Economic Development and Employment Committee is called to order and is being recorded for public access and archiving in accordance with the New York State Open Meeting Law. It is the practice of CB2 to conduct remote meetings with all committee members' cameras on. Okay, public attendees are also encouraged to leave the cameras on, particularly if you're given the floor to speak. All attendees, please keep your microphone muted when you're not speaking. To maintain appropriate discussion and voting process, I will make it clear and known which topics are open for comment by committee members, by board members at large, and by the general public. If you have questions that fall outside of comment time, please type your comments or questions in the chat panel and we will address them as time permits. You may also email the district office at any time outside of these meetings. We are committed to provide access for all of our neighbors, regardless of physical ability or limitations. If you require accommodations or assistance for full participation, please contact the district office 72 hours before any public meeting. We ask that those speakers or presenters use plain language, speak in a moderate tone, and frequently ask if you're speaking loud enough. If presenting, read the title of every slide and describe any image on the slides, such as photos, graphs, and charts. Okay, with that, I will now have the secretary take roll call. Okay, Ms. Gilman.
Thank you, Bill. Good evening, everybody. I'm just going to take a quick roll call. We've got Chair Bill Flanoy.
Here.
Vice Chair Denise Peterson. Hey, Denise. Catherine Gelman, Secretary, that's myself. Ronald Cohen.
Here.
Hey, Ron.
Hi.
Maisha Morales.
Here.
Hey, Maisha. Latrell Masso.
Here.
I see you, Latrell. Ciro Scala.
Here.
Hey, Ciro. And we have
Hi.
Catherine Yearwood Young, Oleg Geyser, and Lindsay Einhorn marked excused.
Thank you.
Roll.
Thank you very much. Okay, with that, I need approval of the agenda. May I get a motion to approve it? Okay, Ms. Morales, second. Ms. Peterson. Okay, any discussion or questions about the agenda? Hearing none, all in favor? Okay, it's unanimous. Did everyone get a chance to read the minutes from March 2022? If you haven't had a chance, if you have any discussion or any issues, please contact the borough office, okay, and let them know of any corrections or just any other issues that you may have with it. Okay, at this point in time, I'm going to have an open session for the public comments on the agenda. If anyone has any questions or comments that they'd like to voice right now, this is your moment to do that. You can either raise your hand or type in the chat box. Okay, I'm seeing nothing in the chat. I see no hands raised. Okay, with that, we'll go on to the presentations. Okay, the first presenter is going to be New York City Cannabis Industry Association, NYCCIA, and that'll be Michelle Fields.
Good evening, everyone, and good evening to everyone that is in attendance. I am Michelle Fields. I am a New York State attorney, both in business development, immigration, state and federal defense, and cannabis law. I'm also the board member of the New York Cannabis Industry Association, as well as the co-chair of their social equity, as well as the chair of their sustainability committee. Recently appointed to Community Board 10, also sit on the Banking and Law Committee of the Queens Chamber of Commerce. I'm just going to make a brief introduction and I'm going to pass it on to my co-board member, Sherry Tarr.
I guess that was the pass. Okay, thank you. I thought you were to say a little bit more. I didn't want to step on you. Thank you so much, Michelle. And thank you all for having me here. I am Sherry Tar. As Michelle said, I am a fellow board member of the New York City Cannabis Industry Association. I co-chair their regulatory committee and have for the last 2 years, which is basically the inception of our fast-growing organization. I am a recovering lawyer, licensed to practice in Illinois, but I do not practice in New York. Instead, I am a cannabis consultant to license applicants, to cannabis brands, to other stakeholders. My lanes that I try to stay in is regulatory compliance, safety and product quality from lab to label. I write and advise on license applications and have been doing so in other competitive states around the country, including our neighbors, New Jersey and Massachusetts, from whom we will learn a lot from their successes and failures. And I'm sure that Ms. Littlejohn has much more to say about all of that. You know, we have limited time, and it's a privilege to be here, and I don't want to take up all of the time. I just want to provide a few comments and very high level about where we are in the state of New York in terms of the development of these highly anticipated regulations. Obviously, everyone knows we're about a year to the week from the MRTA passing and our state becoming legal. And even though the year has seemed to evaporate and go by very, very quickly, to people who are waiting for cannabis regulations, it seems to be going a little bit slow. But I will say, all due respect to our newly appointed OCM, they are working very hard, very diligently, and it's no small task to put together comprehensive regulations that strike a healthy balance between accessibility, equity, safety, and ensuring a sustainable marketplace. What we have done as an industry association, and what I have done as a private citizen who specializes in cannabis regulations, we have provided the regulators, the New York regulators, with our comments and recommendations to how these regulations that are in draft form could be improved. I co-authored a piece, I think that you all might have received it. It's certainly available, where we look at the MRTA very critically. We look at the draft regulations, and we look at other states that have seen successes and failures. We make recommendations for how we can learn from those states, those mistakes, those successes, how we can get along with our neighbors and play in the cannabis sandbox well together and learn from each other, and put together a robust, compliance-focused, safety-focused, accessible, equitable set of regulations that puts New York not only on the map, but a leader in this industry. And we believe that we are positioned to do that. I promised brief, so I will close with, as you probably all know, there are 9 license types, primary license types, and each one of them really represents the full spectrum of a fully functioning, operating cannabis industry. So we've got cultivation, processing, retail dispensary, distribution, on-site consumption, delivery, micro licensing, co-op licensing, and nursery. I could spend literally a week on each one. My purpose today is just to present, look, this is what we're looking at is 9, and it represents every critical aspect of the industry. I think it's fair to say I get a lot of calls all day long. They want inside baseball. So, here's a little information, intelligence, all of which I'm sure that you all have heard about. It would be virtually impossible for New York State, or any state for that matter, to come out all at the same time with 9 sets of regulations that can be implemented successfully. So it's quite likely that this will be a rolling out process, just like New Jersey did it, except with perhaps fewer, call them bumps. We'll call them bumps. You know, I have to say just kudos to our neighboring states because they went out first. And notwithstanding some of the issues and the concerns, of which there are many, it's a new industry. It's a nascent industry. We're all in this together and constructing it. We are in the regatta and we're building the boat as we're in the race. So the good news is that we get to learn from New Jersey and we get to learn from Massachusetts. So I think what we can all look forward to is some draft regulations very soon that will be available for public comment. And then, you know, it'll go through its process and the state will take into account the information, and hopefully soon we, you know, have a robust, fair, safety-focused set of regulations. And I'll close with, I cannot understate, and I think Michelle alluded to this, we cannot understate the importance of, and I tell my licensing clients, I tell in their pre-application preparation work, and then as license holders, community. I also say, depending on what Zoom webinar I'm on, it could be compliance, because I fully and fundamentally believe that that is fundamental to sustainability for a brand, for a license, and for an industry. Integral to the success of this marketplace will be community engagement, community acceptance, community involvement, so that we can mainstream, right? So that we are part, we as in representatives and stakeholders in the cannabis industry, so that we are part of this, we're members and citizens of the community. So you will hear from, and we hope that you as a community board will allow and welcome prospective applicants to come and speak with you and share with you their plans, their vision, their plans for community engagement, and what they hope to accomplish in the community to be a good, responsible corporate citizen. So with that, who is back to Michelle.
Michelle, do not interrupt.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, I was done. I said back to Michelle, and I thank you.
No problem. Okay, yeah, we can't have two people talking, Michelle. I apologize.
Okay, no, you don't have to apologize. I apologize. I just wanted to make sure that we understand the importance of the community board when it comes to the licensing process. And that's why I wanted to really, you know, impress upon these community boards, not this community board, but all the community boards, the importance of your role in this process. It's one thing for me as a cannabis attorney to write application. It's another to help my clients to navigate the community boards, the civic boards, to understand the community dynamics when it comes to the whole entire process. Now, your role as a community board is very important because you're going to be making those recommendations similar to those recommendations for the liquor license. So getting involved, understanding what that process looked like is very important to my clients. And for me and where I stand as a New Yorker, it's important that our clients, our community understand it takes not only community, but it takes capacity, it takes capital, and it also takes the cannabis competency to understand the whole licensing process. You at this time have the ability, because the conditional retail licenses, the comment period is now open. You have the ability to comment on the current regs. You know, if they are vague, if you feel like there needs to be a better understanding what equity means in regards to from inception to standards to the actual execution, this is the time for the community boards to really get involved and really address those concerns, make those comments. And
Ms. Fields, This
ahead.
is why we're here today, to
Right.
ask questions, to discover, some depth so that we get a perspective. You're the experts right now, so we're going to be asking you questions going forward. Okay,
Yes.
so we're on the same page.
Yes, definitely. So with that, I would just like to really encourage each and every one of you to not only get involved on the community board side, to make sure that you can control the business within your border. Ask those pertinent questions in regards to your community plan, your diversity plan, your equity plan. How does that look in regards to your neighborhood employment? That's going to be key in regards to the licensing application. And with that, I can pass it on to the next speaker. But the most important thing is community. The most important thing for New York State, and I want to see for New York State, is to provide an inclusive cannabis marketplace. And that's all of the 5 boroughs, Mid-Hudson, and New York State as well. And especially our impacted communities from East New York to Brownsville to downtown Brooklyn, Fort Greene, South Jamaica, South Bronx, Starrick City, Far Rockaway, South Jamaica. Those impacted communities are really key to the success of an inclusive marketplace here in New York State. And with that, I can pass it on to the next speaker.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the next speaker we have here is Minority Cannabis Business Association, MCBA, and Amber Littlejohn, Executive Director. Where's yours?
Hello there. Thank you. Before I'm going to actually share part of a presentation with all of you that I think provides some really good background insight. As mentioned, my name is Amber Littlejohn. I am Executive Director of the Minority Cannabis Business Association. We are a national trade association dedicated to serving minority cannabis entrepreneurs, aspiring cannabis entrepreneurs, and our communities. We focus primarily in policy development and advocacy. We have a set of model ordinances for cities and municipalities. We have a model state policy that we issued in 2017 and that is currently about to be reissued, and we are circulating a new draft of that. This is an exciting opportunity. I mean, there is hope. There was definitely a commitment to the state of, from the state of New York to get this right. I will tell you, I am concerned as the regulations start rolling out because often there is a disconnect between the ideas of equity and actually creating feasible policy. Oftentimes these social equity programs represent about this much, and the barriers to entry and being able to operate a successful business is about like this. So what I wanted to share with you all that I think really gives a nice background on some of the challenges that you'll be facing and a little bit of the climate, because I think folks have an idea that more is being done than is being done. So the MCBA put together the National Equity Report. It was because we kept having states create policy and calling upon the policy of other states, but those policies weren't working. And so first of all, we wanted to take an inventory of all of these social equity programs in the country and see what kind of policies are there, what are folks doing, what are they not doing. And then we realized that if none of the programs are working, then we need to actually look at other policy considerations. So we went a step further and we looked at things like license caps, premises requirement, how the medical market is being transitioned into the adult use market, how people with previous felony convictions are being incorporated into the industry to really get a holistic view of how the nation is doing. And I will say by some measures, the state of New York is doing a good job, like when it comes to how they've handled opt-ins. On others, they seem to be headed in exactly the same direction that we have seen other states. And unfortunately, some of those places happen to be the most impactful and most devastating. So with that, I'm actually just going to cover our 7 findings and not go through the bulk of this presentation. So starting here, and all right. So this is the 7 findings of our report, sorry. The efficacy of state equity programs does not actually reflect so the express commitments of what people say they want out of equity doesn't actually reflect in what is there. There are now 37 states. The 37th came online when we had just published this. Only 15 of those actually have social equity programs. And only 15 of them have social equity programs. And that includes both medical and adult use in any state that has them. And none of them have actually resulted in a robust, diverse, equitable cannabis industry. In fact, what we previously considered to be the beacon of social equity policy, the state of Illinois, has fallen flat. And we have zero social equity retailers up and running. And meanwhile, folks have had the existing operators have had a 3-year head start. Something that New York got kind of close to doing, but didn't quite get there was, this is a race-based problem. The state of New York knows that, you all know that. Who they are arresting, who is being impacted by this they are absolutely Blacks and Latinos. And it was, for the lawyers, this wasn't even about discriminatory impact. This is actually discriminatory intent. The government intended to do things specifically to Blacks and Latinos. And so to be able to address that wholeheartedly, we need to look for race-based solutions. And so that means we need to be doing the work to survive strict scrutiny when we are setting up laws. That means finding the data that we need to support actions and narrowly tailoring those rules. But race should be a consideration because it absolutely was in creating the problem. Thirdly, this is about license caps. While the state has not capped licenses, there is still potentially a potential to create these siloed programs to indirectly limit and on the municipal level limit. And there will be a consistent push from larger operators to say limit the market. But we are not finding that states that don't have license caps have this proliferation of businesses that are surging up or over concentration problems. The only thing that we are finding any sort of license caps are doing is creating artificially expensive, and they're usually arbitrary, and they are creating scarcity where scarcity does not exist, and therefore driving extraordinary barriers to entry for minorities. So this is something that is striking because when you think about a social equity program and what it fundamentally does, you think that it provides funding. Well, only 6 social equity programs and the state level social equity programs in the country actually provide direct funding to social equity applicants. And none of them, and this is something that concerns me about the state of New York, because it seems as if you are potentially headed in that direction. None of the 6 actually provide that assistance at the day that the adult use market opens. And that means that you're giving early access to medical operators, you're giving early access to others, you're letting people slide in, but that funding does not usually become available until years after, and folks have first, second, and third mover advantage over social equity operators and small minority-owned businesses. The requirement to secure a premise, this is killing folks around the country, and we just beat back a federal requirement in the MORE Act that would have federalized this premises requirement. So requiring people at the point of application to have a license is something that's really devastating. And taking into account just the property restrictions and requirements is something that's essential to the success of any equity program. This is something that still exists in the state of New York. Although you have looser requirements and regulations on the adult use side, because the state will be providing for co-location, meaning allowing these big giant mega operators that exist in your state, the ROs, to transition to adult use, and they'll have adult use and medical in one place. They will be following the medical rules, and New York's medical rules will not allow them to hire people with these criminal backgrounds. And so that means that at any of these big businesses, until the law is fixed, they won't be hiring people, the very people that have been impacted by these laws. And so this is something we are seeing around the country. Now, while New York has focused on wanting to ensure that those people have a pathway to ownership and participation, they are banned from anything involving medical. And then on top of that, I think we are not being realistic about the resources that are needed to actually ensure that those folks are actively participating. Last but not least, and this is one that I cannot stress and impress upon you enough, and that is how inequities in the existing medical market are creating and perpetuating inequities in the adult use market. This is, the ROs have now condensed from 10 to 9. And one of them actually was just purchased by a member company of mine. So these are not diverse companies. The closest thing you had to diverse was woman-owned. And that is now owned by a Canadian holding company that is essentially managed by Scott's Miracle-Gro. So this is not diverse. And so these folks have an exemption to the vertical integration ban. So they will have the benefits of scale, not only of operating within the state, but across the country. They are going to have exemptions to local opt-outs or opt-ins. They are going to, and they are going to be operating again with these bans on being able to hire people with previous cannabis convictions. And it seems as if the state of New York is moving forward expeditiously with providing them early access to the market. The bargain struck in Illinois was, great, they'll get 1 year early access to the market, but they'll pay. 3 years later, they still have a oligopoly and a monopoly in some areas on the market, and there are no social equity folks up and running. And social equity folks in Illinois are fighting to get any of the funding that was supposed to be allocated to them. And so these are the things that you will be working against in trying to create an equitable market in the state of New York and in Brooklyn.
Okay, thank you. So this is what I'm going to suggest of the committee members. I'm sure we all have a lot of questions. So what I'm going to suggest is we're going to go around. Each person gets one question, and the participants, okay, Amber, Sherry, Michelle, the three of you can answer those questions, okay? I suggest we try to make them as brief as possible so that all the committee members get an opportunity to ask questions. And we're going to have a lot of questions, okay? Okay, so I'm going to come from the standpoint of we don't know anything.
Right.
Okay, so I'm going to ask questions that seem obvious, but may not be obvious to everyone.
Right.
Okay, so could you tell me what the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act is?
In a brief, so the MRTA actually is the legalization of cannabis, adult use cannabis in New York State. It allows for, very briefly, a person to possess up to 3 ounces of cannabis flower, 24 grams of concentrate, and store up to 5 pounds of cannabis in their home. It allows for home grow. It also allows for adult use licenses, as Sherry has pointed out. It also expands the cannabis medical sector of my industry, increasing qualified conditions that go beyond cancer and diabetes or PTSD. It also increased the roles of those that now can prescribe medical cannabis. And it also, on the criminal side, it now says that anywhere, in the civil side, anywhere that cigarettes is allowed to be smoked, cannabis is allowed to be smoked. And NYPD or any LEO in the state can now not use the predicate of smell to stop you. It also states that you cannot consume while driving. So it comes with a lot of conflict of interest provision. The adult use cannabis sector does not allow license stacking. So that means that if you are adult use retail dispensary owner, you can't have the other 9 licenses, and on and on. If you're a cultivator, you may have a distributor or processor license, but you cannot have a retail license. You cannot have a consumption license. You can't have a micro business license, and on and on. And Sherry, did I miss, or Amber, did I miss anything? But really, it's just saying we are now both medical use as well as adult use. And for public safety concerns, there are going to be educational requirements in all the licenses. So, and also with our Attorney General, there's going to be, special enforcement to make sure that marketing, the packaging are not attractive nuisances to our kids, to our teenagers. And the beauty of our industry is that we have a Attorney General that's a Brooklynite that is very passionate about protecting New York State. So that enforcement is going to be very aggressive. And also, with the licensing tiers, it also allows for me, as I have interpreted the bill, and I read the bill almost once a month, that it also allows for the diversity in that supply chain. Hopefully, it's not mandated, that we can get it right where there's supply chain diversity, allowing, because the adult use is going to be horizontal and not vertically integrated, it's going to allow more representation, more ownership, and more accessibility in those ancillary areas when it comes to vendors.
Okay.
But my colleagues can add on to that if they want.
Ms. Fields, what I'm going to do, 1 second, sir. Let me recognize you. Just don't jump in. Okay. Ms. Fields, we're going to delve into the individual licensing. Okay.
Yeah.
So don't worry, we'll get to that.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Mack, you're about to jump in and make a comment.
Yeah, I apologize. The only thing I was going to say is, as I understand the MRTA, the limit is up to 5% equity stake in any other license besides the one that someone might have a majority stake in.
Okay, you're not talking about legal. Okay.
Yes, it's not a blanket prohibition against having or being involved with multiple license type businesses. It's up to 5% equity stake.
Okay, not a problem. Okay, thank you.
So let me also add.
Let's move on. Yeah,
okay.
We have other questions. Okay, Mr. Scala.
Thank you all for your presentation. I'm going to focus on the retail end of your conversation, whoever would want to chime in to answer. Two parts. What will the community board's responsibility have in these retailers obtaining a license? That's number one. I know you alluded to it. I'm not sure it's actually in the law. The other part is, I've noticed many stores popping up in our community who are quote unquote smoke shops and seem to be preparing to sell cannabis in their store. And there are 2 actually in Brooklyn Heights, or 3 in Brooklyn Heights at this moment. I was wondering, there seems to be some no regulation basically on time. One of them was open till like 11, 12 o'clock at night. I'm just wondering how the regulations will impact on these stores who I guess are trying to get a jump on the market in the anticipation of the law being passed. My concern is actually, what you had alluded to, is our youth in the community being able to go in those shops and obtaining cannabis.
Okay, Let me just first ask your first part of your question. The community boards are going to make the same type of recommendation as they do with the liquor license. Also, those the provisions, those guides in regards to the 200 and 400 feet is similar to the liquor license requirement. You're going to be asking, the same line of questioning, looking at your business plan. You're going to be looking at your development plan. How long have you been involved in this community? And secondly, understanding that, cannabis, any cannabis product can only be sold to those that are 21 years or older. And with your role, it's important that you can either make the recommendation for or against, but it has to be in writing. To answer your last question, there was written addendum to the gray market area. So those, shops that you are seeing in your community, most of those shops received a cease and desist letter from the OCM recently. They are recognizing this gray market. They're recognizing the concern of the community. And please keep in mind, the MRTA, there is a provision, the community boards do have a role. It is one of the requirements of the licensing to have that community board recommendation. And secondly, in the MRTA, those shops that are operating in, as far as gifting, is illegal under the bill. It may not be in the New York State Penal Code, but it's still illegal under the MRTA. So that cease and desist is going to be considered. And just because a local prosecutor fails to decline to prosecute, don't mean they won't prosecute those individuals. And they have made it clear in regards to those cease and desist letters and your failure to obey that cease and desist and what the fines look like and the potential criminal prosecution. So I hope that answers your question.
I have many more, but I guess it's a lot of time. So one question brings up another question, but thank you very much. And I'm sure we'll pursue it vehemently.
Yes.
Jay, could you bring that down so I can see persist? Thank you. Okay. Yes, Ms. Gilman, I see your hand. Oh, hold on one second. Amber and Kenny, do you have a response back? I see you both have your hands up.
Yes.
Go with Amber first.
Yeah, I wanted to respond back to the second part of that question. And yes, these folks there is now an enforcement action. I really want to, again, extend, it's a bit of a cautionary tale, but also that is the legacy market. These are folks that have been existing, some folks that want to kind of take advantage of the transition, but you have many that are in the legacy market. Almost 80% of the sales that happen in the state of California happen in the legacy space. And so I would definitely implore both the state and Brooklyn to be very mindful of anything that helps transition folks that are in the legacy space into the legal space, because if that does not happen, the legal market will fail because they can outcompete legally operating entities 7 days of the week. So the key is to get people who want to participate, transitioning over and participating by any means.
Okay, thank you, Amber. Okay, Kenny.
The only thing I wanted to say was to our friend, if it's okay for me to call you Ciro, even though we've never met, Ciro. Those are profiteers.
Absolutely, you can call me Ciro. You actually pronounced it very well. Thank you. It's usually screwed up.
Now, those people that you see who are openly and notoriously transacting cannabis business against the advice of the Office of Cannabis Management, and then potentially against or violating a cease and desist order, those are cannabis profiteers. Those are not people who are looking to go through the process and get a license and do it the right way, which the overwhelming majority of the people in the legacy market that Amber just referred to are. Those are people who have the capacity to open some doors and put some product on some shelves and make some money right now and challenge the powers that be, the city and state of New York, to continually shut them down. It happened in Los Angeles a lot in the early part of the 2000s and 2010s. And it's what happens a lot of times whenever a state develops a legal marketplace before they actually have regulations and rules of the road. But that type of business that you see, Cyril, that's a very particular type of profiteer. They're similar to the type of people that were setting up selling personal protective equipment during the pandemic, who may not have sourced them from reputable places.
Mr. Chairman, not to belabor the question,
Mr. Scala, Mr. Scala, I understand we have to move on. There's other people here.
All right.
Okay, but I understand what you're concerned about. Trust me. Okay, Ms. Gilman, I saw your hand raised.
Sure. First, thank you all. It's incredibly informative. It's more than the right time for us to be hearing about it. So we really appreciate all the time you're giving us tonight. And we're here for it, not just tonight, but along the way as this kind of materializes. So thank you. I'd like to think about the ways that our specific community board and CB2 as a geography, so the areas that we cover, the ways that we are impacted and that our population has been impacted by marijuana prior to this law kind of opening doors for a legal marketplace. I want to think about the kind of partners that we can call into community board meetings, that we can talk to at the local level. This might be kind of follow-up for you guys to think about and send to us. The kind of questions we can put into our own formula for what we're going to be asking of businesses that are coming through for license, that are going to strike equity and community engagement and some of those notes. If you have a national template that we can kind of tailor to where we live. And I'm curious what your conversations have been like in our district and in New York and Brooklyn, if you've had them. We've got a new wave of elected officials that are super recent. And I'm curious kind of the momentum that you're all feeling. We are in conversation with those people as well on other issues. And I want to make sure that we're approaching this as a large, diverse district and borough, and that you're having a lot of these one-on-one community board conversations, but there's got to be a larger one with some of these representatives. And what the last piece, the most effective way for us to kind of champion the heart of what you're all talking about, which is an inclusive marketplace, which we definitely believe in. I think speaking for the community board, just on that note, how important that is to all of us. And I think that ways that you see us communicating out from either this committee or this community board as a general body, if and when that consensus happens, that are going to be the most effective, so that it's not just a bunch of voices kind of shouting at once. So since kind of time is urgent and this is all developing in real time, what's your template for a single community board like ours to start reaching out within our district, and kind of where are you at with all of our electeds on this?
Okay, you each have 2 minutes.
Okay. Wow.
Okay, Ms. Fields. No, I'm joking, but try to keep it brief.
Ms. Gilman, I'll first say
Sorry,
to you,
I know it's a lot of questions, so thank you.
First say to you, one, take the lead of your community stakeholders in your community. I know as I go around talking in the community, different community boards, traffic is a concern, security is a concern, creating nuisance is a concern, as well as, how are we, especially those in impacted communities, how are we being defined? And being a Brooklynite, growing up on the Parkway, way before the current development, those that Black, Latino, Asian, Caribbean are concerned about consideration of gentrification and how does those numbers look, and does those numbers push them out of what is considered an impact zone. I will really suggest to you all to really take your role in regards to deciding, your current business, because those current business owners are probably going to apply for a license. What has been the state of have they been good stewardess in your community? I would, really suggest that you sit down as a community board and recognize, what is important to the quality of life in your community. And secondly, I am not pro prosecution. I'm not pro recriminalization. What I am as a lawyer here in the New York State, I have a duty to make sure that my clients follow the law and are compliant with the MRTA. So I'm never going to advise anyone in my community, my clients, to really go against those regs. I want to keep them compliant, especially my BIPOC community, to make sure they have, access, not only access, but equity in this marketplace. But remember, communities such as our communities are going to be given 50% of the license. They're going to consider, veterans. They're going to consider minority and women, those that are living in impacted communities. However, this is the chance for the community boards to help the OCM to define what an impact community looks like, especially in the 5 boroughs. Whether you live in Fort Greene, Brownsville, East New York, South Jamaica, we understand what Stop and Frisk did to our communities. We understand what NYPD's over-policing did to our communities and broken windows. So I ask that you take those in consideration, and really that open comment period really help them define what an impact community or impact zone is.
Okay, thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Yes, Amber, do you have any comments you want to add?
No, I think it was well summed up by Michelle.
Thank you, Amber. Okay, Kenny, I see your hand raised also. Did you want to say something? Oh, and Sherry also, both of you need a chance.
Yes, the thing that I would say is important for us as a community board, and as a Fort Greene resident myself. I'm just trying to lower my hand. Here we go. The thing that's really important to note about our particular CB and our neighborhood is that we have Murder Avenue converted into Myrtle Avenue. We have Fort Greene, which has become consistently the more money has moved into Fort Greene 11205 than any other zip code in these United States over the last 15 years. And we also have permanently the Walt Whitman houses directly across the street from the park. And so we literally have some of the most vulnerable people in Brooklyn, in the 5 boroughs of New York, living right in our community board. And why that's critically important is because people who live in NYCCIA housing run the risk of exposing themselves to the potential of eviction for maintaining their quality of life using a perfectly legal medicine that we all call cannabis. It's a schism between federal and state law that plays itself out in the New York area in a way that it really can't play out any other way, because mathematically speaking, there are as many residents of NYCCIA housing as there are residents of the city of San Francisco, California, which is to say the entire city of San Francisco, California can fit in just the projects in the 5 boroughs of New York. And there are no shortage of NYCCIA housing patients or people who probably could be or should be patients who are improving their quality of life and maintaining their quality of life using cannabis as a medicine. And it's going to be necessary for them to have, as part of those 7 business improvement districts that we have, some clean, safe place where they know that they can access and consume affordable medicine. And as a community board, those are standards that we can make sure to impose on people looking to open businesses in our CB, because one of the things that we know statistically in the 5 boroughs of New York is that $1 spent in the Asian community recirculates for 30 days before leaving, and $1 spent in the Jewish community recirculates for 20 days before leaving, but $1 spent in the Black community only recirculates for about 6 hours before leaving. In Black communities in the 5 boroughs of New York and here in our community board, the businesses there are not typically owned by the people who live there, and the business models are extractive by nature. We can insist that those business models be more circular and be more in line with the progressive history of the city of New York.
Thank you, Kenny. Sherry? You have a comment?
Thank you. Yeah, I'll be super brief, and I get to do that because Michelle and Kenny do such a great job. So I'll just add to this. Ms. Gilman, I thought your questions, there were a lot of them, but they were all meaningful and really thoughtful. And I just want to give add a couple of things into this. I've been very much boots on the ground with the regulations in this state, and also talking to clients, prospective clients, people interested in getting a license all day long. So one of your questions was about the momentum and what are we experiencing? So I can tell you what I'm experiencing is a whole lot of excitement, and people, they say, I want a retail dispensary. Great. Where do you want it? Have you been thinking about where you want it? Oh, somewhere in Brooklyn. Well, where in Brooklyn? And so what I'm doing from what I'm doing, I'm saying to clients, prospective applicants, you need to be thinking right now, not in 6 months, not in a year, right now, about what your vision is for not just your business, but what is your vision for your community engagement? And what if you're not a member of that community? How are you going to position yourself in front of a prospective landowner or landlord from whom you want their property? Why should you be there? So I just want to let you know from what we can do as lawyers, as consultants who are working on behalf of the applicants, we are telling them, you need to be thinking about these very, very important issues, including your community engagement. Where do you want to be? Why do you want to be there? And I'm just like hitting a couple of things. I could speak for hours, but I want to be respectful. I want to tap into something else that came up about concerns, and what we're advising our clients is consistent with what the MRTA and what the regulators are building out from a licensing requirements. So for example, what is your plan for security, right? These license applications can be thousands of pages, and they're literally, I can tell you this because I eat regulatory Cheerios for breakfast. There are literally thousands of regulations, right? No joke. The spreadsheets for the checklist to make sure that we've addressed those in the applications are really, truly like a Bible, a regulatory Bible.
Sherry, can I stop
my
you right
point
there?
is- Yeah.
Okay, because I'm going to be asking you about each of the individual licenses. Okay. So we don't have to go into
I'm not
detail
sure.
now. The
Yeah.
ones that I have a select number, okay, but I will be asking you about those.
Can I just, thank you very much for that heads up. Wish I had more time. I would have been more prepared. I don't have any of my cheat sheets in front of me. There are thousands of regulations, but can I just say, because Ms. Gilman asked about a template, and I understood the spirit of the question. There are some requirements that apply generally to everyone, but how a particular applicant fits into that community is as unique as the community. It's as unique as their brand vision. And it's also about what you as a community board, what you want. How do you want to create your cottage industry of cannabis in your community in this, CB2? So with respect to Mr. Flanoy, did I say that correctly? Let me just say overall, there is a requirement for a security plan, a product safety plan. What is your compliance strategy? What is your business strategy? What's your environmental plan? What's your employment, labor and employment plan? What's your community engagement plan? Like I sound like a politician. There is a plan for that. There is a set of requirements for virtually every concern that you're thinking about tonight, and that and then 50,000 more that you're not even aware of. that are inside every single application. I don't know if that hits on, you know, if 10% of it landed, I feel like that's a success. Does that make sense, what I said?
It does. I appreciate all three of your guys' responses. I think our hope is to be, to learn lessons from what other boards have done so that this district, you know, as Kenny is mentioning, which has been greatly impacted by this, can do right by our community in this process.
Right, right.
Thank you. Okay, Kenny, you only get one bite at the apple. Okay.
I apologize if I may. It's this one is super serious.
No,
It's just because the 7-9.
Kenny, we
Okay.
have other people who need to talk. Thank you. Okay, Ms. Morales.
Hi, good evening, everyone, and thank you all for your wonderful presentation. As a community board member, myself being a community organizer and working in my day job where I serve the community and I get tons of calls. Some of the most recently, I've gotten a large amount of calls from especially historically marginalized communities, impacted communities, Black and Latino folks, public housing residents, asking how they can get into the cannabis industry. And while they know things aren't official yet, for them, how can they start now preparing? One other thing that came up was, while a lot of them feel like, well, this is great that they're going to give priority, so-called, to impacted communities, but the reality is, if this public housing resident wants to start, let's say, a dispensary, that person doesn't have the money to rent a retail space, right? And what service, and are they thinking about that when they're creating these laws and in this industry? So I say, which is very true. As we know, banks discriminate, even if they have a good credit score, right? Banks discriminate, especially against our communities. So with that, I guess I'm gonna get straight to the point. I need to know what exactly, where can I direct, especially marginalized communities, to get, you know, their foot in the door, at least start learning? Where would I send? Thank you.
Fortunately, because there is so much money potentially available in the state of New York, there are resources flooding in all of the time. I encourage them to reach out to organizations like my own, like Minorities for Medical Marijuana, Hood Incubator, and look for free programming to get the basics and the core of the information. I encourage you to tell them, do not hire an expensive consultant out the gate. Just try and figure out at least some of the basics. Start gathering a team of people that have some of the requisite knowledge. To your funding question, this is really where the state is going to need to step up, and where municipalities, to the extent that they can, are going to need to step up. Where you can potentially help and is to help control the price of real estate by, you know, through zoning, and making sure that you don't have a situation we have in some states where there are 3 viable properties within the green zone. And obviously none of those are going to go to somebody that is from an impacted community. So as far as the funding goes, you're right. We are working very hard to get the Safe Banking Act passed, but that's really just going to handle the banking side. It's going to be imperative that the state of New York get creative now. And so that funding that supposedly now is not even going to be available till 2024, that some funding is allocated. Maybe they borrow against it, but something needs to be done to democratize that information. Definitely encourage folks to reach out for me. I am taking the resources of some of your state's largest operators and putting it into kind of evergreen programming to help folks out. So reaching out to organizations like mine that cost $100 a year versus $15,000 a pop. So again, reach out to the organizations that are doing things for free. Start getting connected, go to networking events, meet people, talk to people. And again, the funding issue is going to be something that we're going to really need the state to step up and help out with, because the federal government isn't.
Okay, thank you. May I say one thing? We're asking for information. I would like you not to try to promote yourselves too much.
I was promoting the gamut.
Okay,
There are
thank you.
tons of I mentioned 3 or 4 organizations that are not mine that just do just as good of a job or maybe even better. So
I understand. I understand. I'm just putting that out there.
okay.
So can I
Okay.
just answer the question? I think it
Sure.
is very important. I take it upon myself. I have a duty to really educate and empower my community. I'm working with the Queensborough president. I think that collectively, if we can get our borough presidents to start these educational, sessions to really educate and empower our community as to, what their rights are, what are the opportunities, not only on the adult retail side, but what are the ancillary opportunities that don't require a license. In regards to, and at the end of the day, I'm not an advocate, but I bring the concerns of the advocate in the spaces that I'm in. And the most important thing, and I say this to you, and I've said in other rooms, you cannot have an equitable and inclusive marketplace if 1 million plus or less people in NYCCIA housing are excluded, or public housing, a Section 8, are excluded from participating, from consuming, from home growing, from even, even being an employee in the cannabis space. One thing people don't understand with NYCCIA housing, you have to disclose your income. That is a federal subsidized housing development. Your employment from the cannabis will be disclosed if you choose to, and that could be problematic as well. So we, as the home grow as well as social equity, I have authored and co-authored those white papers, reaching out to HUD, making sure what are the exemptions for especially medical cannabis patients, veterans that are living in public housing. What are the opportunities going to be those living in public housing? Not only public housing, but those that, the union. That's why I say everyone needs to be at the table. This needs to be in an inclusive marketplace. And you have the power not only to make the recommendations, but as New Yorkers, I'm a true Brooklynite. I understand the security concerns. We don't do smash and grabs. Our commercial and our residential buildings share roofs. Growing up on Eastern Parkway and Washington Avenue, one of the grocery stores, maybe twice to 3 times a year, they went through the roof of that business. So that is a concern in our community. When it comes to public safety, the lack of banking is a concern because the cannabis businesses are so cash intensive. We need the community boards. We need the community to really recommend and push for safe banking for New York State, for the cannabis industry as a whole, because it is an egregious public safety concern, and we don't want to see what's happening with the burglaries, with the thefts, internal thefts, as well as the cyber attacks that's being done nationwide as well as globally. So I hope that answers your question, Ms. Morales.
As a matter of fact, Ms. Fields, one of the things I was going to bring up was the Safe Banking Act of 2019. Currently, that's still moving through Congress. And I was wondering, it hasn't been approved yet. So I was just that's one of the things I was going to bring up also as far as the discussion. So, yes.
We've been working on that with Congress, so I'm happy to talk on that whenever you're ready.
Oh, well, yes, I'm just trying to stay on point because Kenny had his hand raised. Kenny, do you have anything you want to add?
I think I actually forgot what the original question was. Oh, right. Where resources about information. Yes, there are some very, very, very good ones. Resources and information. Restoration Plaza, Bedford-Stuyvesant has a business coaching and business mentoring program. None of us are associated with it. So this is not self-promotion in any way. So for someone who's looking for some business coaching, some mentoring, entrepreneurship, that kind of training, it's available, and I think it's completely free through Restoration Plaza, Bedford-Stuyvesant, in addition to the cannabis-related organizations that Amber mentioned. And what someone can do is, and this is going to sound super, super corny, but they can go on Instagram and follow some of those service organizations that Amber mentioned, because there's no shortage of events and discussions and panels and information sessions, that are typically available. I mean, sometimes there's depending on how compelling the content is, sometimes it's an expensive ticket, sometimes it's just a Zoom meeting, but it's pretty much always informative, especially if you're coming from outside of the industry and you're looking to be an entrepreneur in the space. So that's one great way to get access to information resources. I'm going to resist the urge to self-promote, even though I run a nonprofit that offers information to people for free. If somebody wants to, they can just ask me in the chat. And then the other thing that I wanted to circle back to was the critical role that the 79th and 88th precinct are going to play in the development of this industry in our community board. What we see in other states and other jurisdictions is as a function of the fact that cannabis products are lighter to carry than cash and more valuable. There are these mass robberies that are happening where people just literally flood the zone with humans, run into a place, overwhelm the security, snatch and grab, and run away with all that they can. And you hear stories about local police officers who, may still have some feelings about the legalization of cannabis, will sit back and watch and recommend that the business owners hire their own private security, or recommend that they do something other than call the police, because the police may or may not be there to help them if they're in the business of selling cannabis. And so that's some place where the community board can really lead on an organization to organization level by doing outreach into the individual precincts and also to the police department, to the NYPD.
Thanks, Ken.
Mr. Roy, can I add this? This I think is very.
I'm going to basically say the same thing I said to Kenny. Okay, I have to be fair to everyone. We're going to have a lot more questions, and unfortunately, if I keep having people come back and answering the same question over and over again, we can be here for a very long time.
No, this is just something I think is very important that the community board knows, especially Ms. Morales. She answered this question. And in regards to cannabis, readiness, make sure those that are, equity applicants, go down to downtown criminal court, make sure everyone gets that certificate of disposition to show that they had a prior cannabis related arrest or conviction. You can make that certificate of disposition a part of your application, and those are free. So that's provided in all the criminal courts in all the 5 boroughs. So you can start that now, and the fingerprinting process should start now as well, because that's a long process. So I just wanted to add that.
I was actually going to bring that up, Ms. Fields.
You're welcome.
Okay, like I said, I have a lot of questions. It's going to be comprehensive. The things you're talking about, I will be covering. Okay, but we are limited on time. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to go right now is I want to go through all the licenses. Okay, mentioning each one, please give me a quick description of what that license is. Could you do that for me, please? Okay, so first thing I want to know about is conditional cultivator license. What is that? Ms. Fields?
Sherry, you want to take that since I've been talking the whole time?
Yeah. Are you talking about the one that is been made available to existing hemp farmers?
Yes. Temporarily,
okay.
you get, yes, exactly.
So I'm going to be very brief, give you high level. And all due respect, I did not know that this meeting would be this long, and I actually have a flight in 15 minutes. So I'm going to be really quick with my answers. Conditional hemp means that hemp farmers that have been cultivating hemp are given the opportunity not to be grandfathered, but to apply to start growing before the full-blown, oh, thank you. Somebody just put that up there. Thank you very much. To start growing now. The issue is we need to make sure we have enough supply to meet the demand. And when you've got experienced farmers that have been doing this and have proven to be compliant and successful in their operations, they are now given the opportunity to apply for and begin cultivating cannabis for the legal market.
Okay, thank you, Sherry. I'm going to let you go. If you want to send any information to the board office, by all means do so. And you can always listen. You can also listen to this is going to be on YouTube. So you can always listen to the rest of the meeting on YouTube.
And I'm going to stay. I don't mind going on the plane last. I want to add value here. So if you'll have me, I'll stay until the lady's voice gets so loud and so demanding that I have to go.
Okay, I was just giving you the opportunity. Okay,
I appreciate that, and I will take that opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, now Sherry, one of the things that you were talking about, and I believe it's also you have to be an authorized hemp grower in good standing to qualify for this. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. You know what, Taya, if you want to put up that list and then let each one of the presenters to go through it themselves, I will allow that. Okay, and I'll go, Amber, you go first, then Ms. Fields, and then I forgot, I'm sorry, I don't see your name now, so I forgot, I apologize.
Sherry or Kenny?
Kenny, okay, so Amber, Sherry, Kenny.
So we just talked about, are we starting from the regular cultivator license now?
No, go down from there, we already talked about
Okay,
that.
so a processor license is somebody who processes cannabis, so takes flower cannabis and processes it either into oils, tinctures, edibles, really some form for end sales that is not flower. So that's really the bulk of what they do. I believe in the state of New York, you you all have the separate alcohol tiers. So yes, it's somebody who processes, makes anything that is not flower.
Into some sort of form that
Yes,
right.
That's what I mentioned. Yeah.
Yes,
so anything
exactly.
Go ahead.
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, Amber, just continue, just go straight down the list and they'll
Okay, if you want me to keep going. A
Yes.
cooperative license is a license where it would be kind of limited in size, but it would allow you to own with another group of individuals. And this is going to be, again, a license category that is geared towards social equity and to provide opportunities for folks to pool resources. This has been tried in other states with varying levels of success due to limitations that are placed on scaling and ownership. Distributor, that is somebody who purchases product, whether it is flower or finished manufactured products from the processors or cultivators, and then distributes them to folks for retail sale. Retail dispensary, that one's pretty self-explanatory. That is somebody that sells retail cannabis products. So again, that could include flower, manufactured cannabis products, and then accessories as well, smoking accessories and other things. Microbusiness licenses, this is one of my favorite yet least favorite. This is where the business is limited in the size that it can grow, but It is, but they are actually allowed to vertically integrate. They are one of the few license classes that will be allowed to vertically integrate. It can be done well, like the state of California, where the canopy limits and also the income, limitations or the lack of income limitations allow it to be a flexible license where it can grow and you can actually create a profitable business. And then you look at the opposite of that being somewhere like New Jersey or Illinois, where they have limits that are placed on really even being able to make these sustainable, profitable businesses. Delivery, that is being able to deliver either from a retail location, from a retailer to a consumer. I believe New York does not have a non-storefront retail license, which means that essentially you could get your product instead of a retailer from a distributor and then be able to sell that directly to the customer without having the retail intermediary. Nursery license. This is somebody who can sell clones. So clones are the little tiny cannabis, the little baby cannabis plants. Depending on how your nursery license is set up, this could also be genetics companies. So people who bioengineer plants. And so those clones could be sold to retailers. Some delivery licenses, again, I say this because the cake has not been baked all the way on, and some of these would be able to sell to home cultivators, but I believe this is retail. Last but not least is on-site consumption. This is an indoor space, kind of like a bar, but they won't sell alcohol, and they will allow for consumption of cannabis products on premises, and allow for cannabis products to be sold in that location for consumption. So again, trying to make that as brief as possible. Please feel free to ask about any of the above.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, one of the things is I just want people to know what licenses were available to them and what was the process. Michelle, did you want to say anything, or Kenny?
Yes, I just wanted to say one thing about the cooperative. You can only be a member of one cooperative. The cooperative and micro businesses are going to be limited in regards to their square footage and amount that they could harvest. Secondly, in regards to most of the licenses, but for retail in New York State, most of these are B2B and not B to consumer. And thirdly, in regards to the retail dispensaries, you can have up to 3 retail dispensaries, and you can also have up to 3 consumption lounges. The same requirements of the 200, 400 feet are going to apply to the consumption lounges as well as to the retail dispensaries. And I believe as well as to the others, like on, the cooperative as well as the other licenses. Also, what's important that a lot of people, if you read the fine print, if you are a license holder and before December 31st of 2019, if you have direct interest in a property, retail, whether it's retail or consumption, long as you show that that ownership was before 2019, you're not in violation of the license stacking rule. So those are some of the nuances to these licenses. But with the retail, with the delivery, you have to have 25 full-time employees as well. And you're going to have retrofitted, vans that are going to safeguard against cross-contamination as you carry those products, which is also important. And I don't know, I may be missing anything else, Sherry, that I may be missing?
I mean, this is hot. this is fairly high level, nothing that you're missing at this point. There are, as I mentioned in the chat, there are limitations and requirements within each. They're unique to each. They carry over into others. It's a matrix. It's a twister game. But Miss Littlejohn and Miss Fields, as always, did an excellent job. I think at this point, in where the board is and is learning what. I think what's most important is that there are multiple license types that are available. It is a flat, if you will. It's intended to be a flat system, limiting what's been called vertical integration. And then within each license type, there are some, not only limitations, there's some opportunities. So for example, if you are a processor, and just pardon me, don't quote me on the regulation because it's not right in front of me, but generally speaking, if you are a processor, you have the opportunity to process some of your own product and sell that. But you can't go outside of that. You can't, right? So they're trying to create, again, it's part of the accessibility and equity so that everybody has an opportunity to participate in the market and nobody has a license that allows them to grab too much. So no, Michelle, to your question, nothing specific to add. There's thousands of things to add because each license will have very, very specific security requirements, safety requirements on processing. There's so much in terms of product handling, keeping things separate, keeping operations separate. There's just so much that it wouldn't make sense today, given the intention of the board tonight to start to unravel each of those. But my colleagues did a fine job. I couldn't have done it better. And again, as I pointed out, the devil is in the details, so to speak. And the regulations are under construction right now.
Okay, thanks, Sherry. Kenny, I see your hand raised.
Yes, the only things I wanted to add were one about a look back, one about a look ahead, and then one about a look from 30,000 feet. So in the look back, somebody had asked the question initially about the provisional cultivator licenses. The provisional cultivator licenses come from people who are already licensed to cultivate hemp. The important thing to understand about the development of the hemp license program that it happened before social equity was a thing. So there was no social equity component to the hemp licensing program, which means that by extension, there is no social equity component to these provisional adult use cultivator licenses on the cannabis side. So that's the look back. On the look ahead, Sherry, I think, mentioned something about the day one demand. And it's important for this community board and for any community board that's going to be even thinking about providing either brick and mortar locations for people to purchase cannabis or people to consume cannabis is that it is literally not possible to satisfy the demand. There is no conceivable way to satisfy the demand for dried cannabis flower, given the prohibition against interstate commerce, which is to say everything sold in the state of New York has to be cultivated in the state of New York. And right now, even with all of the hemp farmers up and running and cultivating as much flower as they could all day, every day, and everyone who's thinking about possibly getting a cultivator's license, getting up and running all day, every day, if day one of adult use sales happens sometime before my daughter hits middle school, and she's 8 now, there's not going to be enough flower in the city and state of New York on day one. And that's really the 30,000 foot view is looking forward. There's simply not enough capacity. From 30,000 feet, there's no way to meet the demand. And then looking backward, the hemp cultivator transition into adult use cannabis cultivator license program has no social equity component to it at all.
Thank you, Kenny. Okay, committee members, before I go to my next phase of questions, is there any questions from committee members? Cyril, I see you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think I thank everyone here who coming here this evening. There's a lot to digest here, obviously. And my head is spinning with all the different regulations and who's on first. I think what Kate mentioned hit a note to me. I think as a committee, we probably would be good for us to coordinate with the Transportation and Public Safety Committee, because there's many issues that overlap with us and with them in a lot of ways, and also the licensing committee that we health committee. Maybe off record, off this meeting, maybe you and your good office could talk to the executive committee, and maybe we can have these people come again if they don't mind. I mean, it's a lot to talk about, and talk to us about it, because I think the components are quite unique. There's a retail component, there's a legal component, there's a obviously abusive component that many in my community are asking about, a lot of areas. And it brings up a couple of questions that I don't want to go into now, but location. Can all these stores be anywhere? Where can they be built? There's a lot of things. So just to make it short, I would hope that we can, maybe a few of us can chat with the other committees and maybe build some sort of as Kate mentioned, some sort of a unified way of looking at all these people who are coming to us for licenses. And then we could be equitable, of course, and make sure they get their proper due, but also to protect the community, that which is our job. That's one of my comments.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Scala, I believe Hess is also is interested in getting involved in these conversations also. Okay.
Hello.
And as far as the real estate portion, as far as I believe the state of New York and the city of New York has a program to start setting aside locations. I'm not sure about that, but I believe there's a program involved in that right now, asking people in advance what locations they would like to have. And I believe they're actually looking to set that aside. You're saying no, Michelle? Well, okay. Yeah, okay.
I would suggest community those that are looking to, go into retail, that make sure, as New Yorkers, we have 2 fair zones. And you don't want all of those equity applicants to be in 2 fair zones where there are deserts. You want to make sure that they have an opportunity to be on those border locations, especially, Nassau County has opted out those border locations like Queens and Nassau County, Staten Island, and New Jersey. It may be that all the prime property is already gone, but there should be an opportunity. There should be a competitive process, and equity applicants should not be relegated to, 2 fair zones all the way out in Canarsie, which no problems with Canarsie, but getting to those adult use retail dispensaries is going to take them to take 2 buses or probably a dollar van and a train to get to. So that's all I would suggest.
Okay, yeah, I just brought it up because of the question that was asked. Okay.
Hi, I have a question.
Sure, Latrell.
Hi, thank you for a great presentation tonight. I learned so much that I had no idea about the different, points. But I'm curious, what about the other piece? Cyril just brought up a piece about abuse piece. Has anything been put in if they become over abusive? In that sense, I understand about the marketing, making money, but we can't forget about the other side, because we saw abuse with it before in other areas, especially in the Black and Brown communities. So I understand one piece about making money, but I want to understand the other piece about making sure the abuse piece is covered also.
Right.
Okay, Latrell.
So, go ahead.
Hold on, I'm going to let Kenny go first this time.
The short answer to that is yes. There are a lot of safeguards built in for community involvement and community input. For example, as regulations are drafted and released, there's always a 60-day comment period. And I can tell you from experience that the Office of Cannabis Management and the Cannabis Control Board are very, 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 very interested in getting public comment during the public comment period, particularly from organizations or groups of people that might represent a constituency. And then in terms of the actual law itself, The places where the consumer comes in contact with cannabis-based products, that interaction is regulated a lot like vice, a lot like alcohol. And so the brick and mortar locations will have to be at least 500 feet away from schools and 200 feet away from houses of worship. As part of the licensing process, applicants will have to demonstrate, you have to forgive me, I'm being a little generous with the language. Applicants are going to be encouraged to, or highly suggested to include a narrative story as part of their business plan when they submit their application to the office or to the board for approval. And they are strongly encouraging applicants to have a letter of reference from their community board, and ideally from some member of the clergy inside of from within their community as a character reference. And so, I think when you talk about it, I'm not sure, so by the way, these are my palms, this is my open face. This is how I talk to my wife when I'm not arguing with her. I'm not sure if by abuse you meant abuse of the system by people looking to get licensed and take advantage, or if you meant abuse of the products themselves.
Well, I was speaking about abuse of the product itself, but also the abuse of the way you explained it too. And because I have another concern too, and I can throw this out there while I still have a moment to speak, if they'll allow me, about how can we make sure that the cannabis is not lined with anything, it's straight cannabis. Because a lot of times drugs are lined with stuff, cannabis. I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, but I just want to make sure that it's 100% natural what people are using. Because you hear stories on the other side.
Yeah, well, that's one of the great things about having a regulated market, is that the amount of testing that goes into these products now that is required by the state is pretty stunning. So things that you wouldn't even consider to be hazardous or scary, things like heavy metals and other things that are considered contaminants will not be in these products or should not be sold. So the regulations are definitely in place to keep folks, if they are complying with the law, to keep the products safe. And that's one of the great things about having product available through the regulated market and through trackable channels. One of the other things that the state of New York will have that every other state has is seed to sale tracking. So from the time that product is a seed, it will be tracked through the system. So you will know where it came from and how it was created. And if there are problems, that can then be traced back to, the point of the problem and address it.
Right.
Ms. Fields?
And also, I think Governor Hochul just a day or two ago had started a campaign for safe and conscious consumption of cannabis. And within the MRTA, regardless of which license you obtain, there has to be an educational component. And Latrell, your concerns are very, these are the concerns of all the communities that I speak at. And there are serious concerns because a lot of people celebrated legalization, but for the Black and Latino community, it just reminded them of the war on drugs. It just reminded them, the impact and the continuous destruction that the war on drugs did in our community. So for us, legalization was not a time to celebrate. A lot of us, it was triggering, it was traumatic. Also important to know is that New York is going to require those cultivators to be GMP certified. And that means that they have to go through a process of quality assurance. You as a consumer, in regards to especially medical cannabis patients, you should require a certificate of analysis of all products, be it, cannabis, THC related products or CBD, because in our communities, we have so many of our community members with qualified conditions. Anything that is adulterated could affect their condition. So that's very important. So you bring up an important concern, and it's isn't a concern that's cross-generational. So I just want you to know, it's just not your concern here in CB2. It's a concern, you know, across the 5 boroughs as well as the state. And I really support a unified or a uniform COA system that is required for all products, just not medical products, but recreational products as well.
One of the things, okay, I'm sorry. One of the things I also realized is those testing equipment are very expensive. Okay,
Yeah,
so
the
that's
testing,
another hurdle.
yeah, so the testing is third party and it is extraordinarily expensive. And that is one of the challenges for small businesses. But again, that's where in the final regulations that shake out, striking that good balance between protecting the community and ensuring that we aren't hindering small businesses.
Yes, okay. I'm going to basically let you guys know that I also have a meeting coming up shortly. So, okay, so Kate, can I just run through with something really quick? And then, okay, so I'm going to run through a couple items I just want you to comment on. I'm going to throw them all at you at the same time. Pick and choose or pick them all, but just make sure you give time for all 3 of you to speak, okay? Okay, what is the labor peace agreement? Okay, what is the environmental sustainability program? Okay, also let me know what the social equity mentorship program is. Okay, and finally, what's your feeling about the impact on New York employees and employers? That issue. I know. Kept it simple for you guys. Okay, who wants to go first?
All right, I will take 2, 3, and 4. Can you remind me what they were again, please?
Okay, labor peace agreement, environmental
Okay, that's the easy
sustainability.
one. Let me just take that one really quick. Labor peace agreement is easy. Cannabis workers are basically represented by the United Food and Commercial Workers Union Local 338. And that is it's an easy labor. It's the only bona fide labor organization in the space as recognized by the state of New York. And so a labor peace agreement means as a licensee, you'll need to have an agreement with UFCW in place. Luckily, Nikki Cateman and Saul Guerrero are very, very nice people, and they're easy enough to liaise with and to talk with. My email is in the chat, and anyone who wants to find out more, I can connect you to UFCW directly.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
Okay, so
Yes.
basically what it says, the labor, and you all know that New York is one of the largest union states in the country. That's number one. And we have over 1 million union members. What the labor peace agreement says that, you know, as a licensee, as a cannabis, you know, business, that you will not interfere with the employee's right to unionize. And it tells the employees that you will not, you create stop workage, and you will not interfere with that business ability to operate. But it also puts the employer on notice that you will create a safe working environment. You will also pay livable union wages to your employees, and that we can all sit at the table in regards to this inclusive marketplace.
Thank you. And then what was number 3? There was 3, and then there was something about social equity.
Sure. Also, environmental sustainability program.
That's totally Sherry. That's a layup for Sherry. I'm going to leave that one alone. But then the next 2 were more
Well,
in
you know
my
what?
lane.
Let me do that to Sherry right now then. Oh, wait, Sherry's
Sherry
gone.
had to hop off, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
right. Sherry's on a plane. Sorry.
that's right. So, okay, so if anyone wants to take that,
I can take that. So
sure.
a lot of you don't know that New York State has 70,000 miles of fresh waterways. We are a very green state. What the sustainability initiative means that you will, provide those environmental green type of practices that will not interfere with the freshwater resources of New York State. Number two, you will engage in green practices, not only in your packaging, your labeling, but also in your cultivation practices. And for a lot of you that don't know, our aquifers, especially upstate New York and in Long Island, that you will not compromise. You will also provide some type of water reclamation type of program for your cultivation site. You will also provide, a testing for the soil, especially upstate New York. We are a pesticide-ridden state because of agriculture, and that you will also provide that testing, and that you will you will implement sustainable practices within your business, whether ESG, or corporate social responsibility, in regards to an environment, in regards to governance, in regards to sustainability and community.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Okay, next one is Social Equity Mentorship Program.
Effectively non-existent, and not controversial. One of the huge progressive victories in the MRTA was the state of New York requiring the appointment of a chief equity officer, which is someone whose job it was or is to ensure that the rollout of these regulations and the creation of this marketplace, which is the state of New York essentially directing tens of billions of dollars of new wealth created out of thin air. And it was supposed to be done in an equitable way. There's an argument being made that not having a chief equity officer in place while these regs are being written and as they're being rolled out and potentially implemented actually violates the spirit of the MRTA, which is both a revenue bill for companies that are already making money in the space and generating tax revenue for the state of New York. It's also, in addition, it's a restorative justice bill. It's supposed to center not reparation, but restoration of communities that were underserved and over-policed as a function of the prohibition against buying and selling and consuming cannabis. With the idea being that restoring the harm that was done by cannabis prohibition would become essentially the law of the land here in the state of New York, and it would effectively be a budget priority for the legislature and a regulatory priority for the executive, since it's now determined to be legal and there's no prohibition against it. That part of the bill has really yet to materialize. So when you talk about anything related to social equity, I think there was a comment earlier about the one woman-owned medical, of the 10 medical licenses, the one that was woman-owned allowed the state of New York, allowed the former administration to be able to call the program diverse and equitable because one of the 10 businesses was owned by women. It didn't matter that it was owned by one of the wealthiest families in the Hudson Valley. They are women. And so by definition, the program was diverse. That was supposed to have translated into and expanded through the MRTA and the legalization of adult use cannabis. The marketplace was supposed to continue to be equitable and then some, under the guidance of this chief equity officer. That person who the state had identified declined to take the position for his own reasons, which have yet to be made public. And yet the program moves forward anyway without the guidance or direction of a chief equity officer. And that is the most important thing for anyone who's thinking about being an entrepreneur or an innovator in the state of New York by going through the licensing process. If you don't already have access to capital and you don't already have access to, you don't already have political connections, it's going to be practically impossible for you to win or earn, depending on how you look at it, any of the first 200 licenses that are going to be issued by the state of New York.
And on that topic, of the licenses
Yeah.
that are going to be issued. Let's hit that one right now, okay? Because I find this very interesting. The Office of Cannabis Management announced that the first 100 legal cannabis dispensary licenses will go to New Yorkers with past marijuana convictions. However, okay, they need to prove to be a current or past owner of a profitable legal business with 2 years of financial history. Yes, Amber. Sorry, yes.
So, it sounds good. It sounds good on its face, but it really doesn't take looking really much. If you actually look at the regulations, this is a merit-based qualification system. So what it's going to do is it's going to favor somebody who, now mind you, it's not a personal cannabis conviction. It could also be a family member. It's going to favor people who are business owners, who have extensive experience, extensive support from multi-state operators, extensive support from deep-pocketed investors, so that they can create these robust, because again, when you're looking at it from a merit-based system, it's always going to favor the best, the highly capitalized. This requirement that you have operated a successful business for 2 years is, to me, arbitrary in a sense, because it's, or I would absolutely be stunned if the state is not sued on equal protection issues, because it makes no sense. So that means that if you are somebody with a cannabis conviction that worked for somebody else and had that give you the requisite experience running their successful business, that you would be disqualified. So not only do I think the program does not pass constitutional muster, but it is actually not designed for success if our desire is to take people that have been truly impacted and get them into the system. Just a little bit about really briefly about the types of application selection processes. You have merit, which is, picking the winners, and feasibility, which, and then there is lottery, where they're just kind of throwing it in and figuring, pick a number. Both of those can actually be easily gamed. The one system that we actually like is a compliance model, where the state looks at what does this business need to run a compliant, safe, responsible business. And if that criteria is met, then they would qualify for a license or a provisional license. That is not what's happening in the state of New York. And that is a bit concerning, because this merit-based program is really, again, going to favor the highly capitalized. And I'm not saying that out of, it's just experience. It's what we've seen around the country for every program that's rolled out in a merit-based system. On paper, you might have a few minorities,
Yes.
but speaking back to your mentor program, what you're going to see that become is a kingmaker program, where the operators say, come here, Black or brown person, I need you to come here, and I need you to stand here while we develop a relationship, and then I'm going to take a percentage of your business, or where I'm going to invest in you and you're going to give it back to me, and I'm going to find a way to profit. So without the guardrails, like Kenny said, put in place by an equity officer, you're going to see these equity programs be sort of like little rainbow sprinkles just tossed in to make people feel better.
Yes, definitely. I totally agree with all her sentiments. I find some problematic areas in this new bill. These new regs, especially when it comes to the residency requirement. That's number one. And that 2 years of profitability. I understand you need to show that your business wasn't just a hobby, but from my understanding, it's the 2 years over the course of your business has been in operation. And that's going to be challenging, as Amber has stated, for most equity applicants. And as well as, capitalizing, it's one thing to, be issued a license. It's another to capitalize that license from scalability to all the way to, the ability to monetize that license. And so the operating costs as well, it's going to, and the startup costs are going, especially in a retail area, it's going to be, astronomical for most people, as Amber said. So you're going to have these well-funded individuals that are probably going to, win most of these licenses unless we step in and go to the structure that she, has mentioned, the client structure model, which I think is more fair and equitable.
Those are all fantastic points. And I just wanted to respond or to highlight something that our operations manager, Bruce Sturman, put into the chat, which is that in cooperation with the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York, CCB/OCM have identified some number of potentially high traffic, high volume areas, locations, which the State of New York is identified and going to build out and then offer lease terms to some prospective social equity applicants to be able to open the first retail stores. It's a very ambitious program. It does require selling some $100 million worth of cannabis tax generated bonds into private markets in order to fund it in the first place. And so it will require some amount of tax revenue to have been generated in order to be able to project what kind of value those bonds might have as they mature. And that entire process is, as you can imagine, going to be far from transparent, and will also involve most likely some of the largest financial institutions in the world. And the key thing about that point, which Bruce, I'm glad you put it into the chat, is that when the MRTA was passed, a year and 3 days ago, and as it was drafted and debated over the course of the last 6 or 7 years, nothing like that was ever envisioned. There was nothing discussed or debated or even contemplated where that there would have to be some record of tax revenue that had been paid to the state that they can be used as a baseline for projecting future revenues that could then be used to fund a bond that would then be sold off into capital markets. In fact, what the bill said was that the 10 registered organizations, the 10 companies in New York that will be vertically integrated and that will have the exclusive right to be vertically integrated at the size which they're vertically integrated, they were supposed to pay into a fund prospectively and proactively that would pay to incubate all social equity businesses across New York's 62 counties. That was supposed to have happened well in advance of day one of sales, certainly with a chief equity officer in place to help guide and direct the process. And so what ends up happening is, what has ended up happening was that a bill was passed that was optimistic and hopeful that regulators could be put in place who would then create an equitable marketplace that would reflect the spirit, the restorative justice spirit of the MRTA. And what we have in reality is 100 to 200 winners who are going to be chosen by the state of New York, who are then going to be located by the state of New York in property that's owned by the state of New York and built out by the state of New York to contractor or by contractors who were chosen by the state of New York. Then and only then will anyone who isn't one of those 10 registered organizations be able to sell cannabis products to the public. And so it's that kind of disparity between the intention of a bill as written and then the execution of regulations as developed by political appointees that the people on this call and that community boards like ours really need to be aware of when we start thinking about allowing people to open up and offer their products to our community residents.
Kenny, there was a reason I was asking these questions.
I have one quick line, and this is something.
Hold on one second. Hold on one second, Amber. Okay, Sarah?
Yeah, I think we're on overload, Mr. Chairman. I'm personally, there's quite a bit of information for us. I would like to get some finality to the issue because there's a lot here for us to digest. And I suggest that we probably have to meet again and focus in on certain parts of this to specifically talk about them. Because what they're offering, what these great people are offering is quite a bit of information. I, for one, every once in a while, I do phase out. I'm sorry. I appreciate it.
Oh, Cyril, trust me on this one, Cyril, they will be coming back, and there is a lot of information here.
Yeah.
Amber, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to make a comment, and then we'll give Kate the last word. Okay? This is what I'm looking at right now. The cannabis industry right now, from what I can see, has a lot of potential. Unfortunately, there's a lot of hurdles here.
Yeah.
Okay? It's going to be very competitive. Okay, without a question, without a doubt. And there are high barriers of entry, dollars, and regulations. Okay, there's also another thing that's going on right now, which is there's shifting legislation. Okay, every month, it just changes. They keep tweaking it. Okay, so you might start off with one idea what's going to happen, and then before you know it, that idea is completely out the window, as Kenny, as you were discussing. Okay, so for a small entrepreneur, they won't be able to keep up. Okay, and finally, the other issue which no one has talked about is even though the state says this is legal, the federal government doesn't say it's legal. So they can target individual entrepreneurs on a federal level. And that makes this really dicey. Kate, I'm going to give you the last word here.
Whew, you guys, a really, really good night. I know you're giving a lot of your time, Bill, Ciro, Latrell, Denise, the other board members on the call, Taya. I think Ciro is exactly right, and I think Bill is planning this anyway, but to have you all back in a way that focuses us on a few things that apply to what we can control, and to integrate the committees that are involved, HES and public safety being the biggest that I can think of. I know the other board members are going to share deep concerns about safe banking, and especially about NYCCIA exclusion. It's just not possible for us to represent the community without representing NYCCIA really loudly here. It's completely unacceptable. So I think we're right here with you. I think Sarah's also right in saying this is a lot to take in on behalf of what's going to be a lot of people involved in this process. So I think this is the start. It's the right start, and would love to follow the executive committee's lead in bringing you all back and having the full board understand exactly how we can be the best gatekeepers in what is a really wild landscape right now, and be able to not just react to it, but obviously impact it. So commenting on what you're saying in comment periods, and becoming a voice for community members and what impact communities and zones are defined as. Took big note of that being a role that we can play when we're kind of organized as a big body. So I think just echoing Ciro, inviting you all back, and saying thank you for giving us that time. And I think there's enough concerns across health, public safety, regulation, licensing, certainly on the business development side, that we need to involve more than just our committee. So thank you all.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that'll conclude this part of the meeting. Okay,
Yeah.
there's still other aspects of this meeting to go. I don't think we have quorum. Do we have quorum, Taya? Okay, based on the fact that we do not have quorum, I'm going to make a suggestion, and I'll accept an motion, that we, you know what, I'm going to do the chairperson's report. Okay. As far as the chairperson.
Chair Flynn, I am so sorry. You do have quorum.
Oh. Okay,
1, 2,
Taya?
3, 4, 5. You do.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I'll just go a quick chairperson's report. I'm just going to talk about the recovery of the economy so far. Subway ridership is up. Restaurant reservations are up, but currently right now there's a slight downtick. Interesting enough, rental inventory has been reduced. More and more people there are fewer opportunities to find rents. And the rents in our district are going up to new records. I don't understand that, but that's exactly what's happening. Home sales are basically pretty much flat. Unemployment claims right now in New York City right now, our unemployment numbers are 7%. Okay, which is twice the national average. Currently right now in Brooklyn, 71% of the Brooklyn people are actually vaccinated. Only 71% is the lowest of all 5 boroughs. Okay, and right now, based on where we are economically, we're at 75%. Okay, where we economically where we were as far as revenues and generation of business that we were pre-pandemic. Okay, so that's where we are. And as far as the restaurants themselves, they're at 60%. They're doing 6% of the business they did pre-pandemic. So that's where we stand right now. It's in an upward trend since the beginning of the year. That's a good thing. But we're still having little hiccups, but for the most part, the trend is upward. Okay, and unemployment is basically coming down. So with that, that's my chairperson's report. Is there any other committee business that we need to speak of?
I think, Bill, the only thing is the district statement of needs that we'll start to work on soon. And that is already in the works from kind of things we've done before. But just to flag that for our committee, that we'll be talking about it probably offline with everyone and then in the coming meetings.
Okay, I agree with that. Community forum, any new business? Anyone from the community? We have one community member left. Okay. If that's the case, I will now accept the motion to adjourn. And I will accept that also. Okay, Mr. Scala, Ms. Gilman. Okay, with that, great meeting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.